I'm still in 3.
We're going to be in Exodus 13 this evening.
Too much pollen in that.
Yeah, everybody's hacking and all right. Don't we just love a spoonful of pollen every day? We just love it, right? Yeah. It is bad. I mean, it's bad when the whole parking lot was covered and it cleared it completely off from the rain, and now it's all back.
It's all back.
And you know what happened today? I went to wash my truck, it's in a car wash. I was drying it off, and the pollen was right back on it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Drying it.
Yep.
Even after morning.
Yeah, it was controlled because I was drying it off.
Yep. It's crazy. All right. Good to have everybody tonight and those online with us. We're going to, as I said, we're going to be in Exodus 13. God is going to lead the Israelites tonight and out of Israel. That wouldn't be good. Out of Egypt. Out of Egypt, we know they've already left. They've got Sukkot. But we're going to see here as He continues to lead them out and away from everything that goes on. So let's go and jump to our questions real quick. We'll jump into those. Go back to Mark 3, 1 through 5, dealing with Jesus and His miracles on the Sabbath. Why did the Pharisees, well, I just answered the question, why did the Pharisees want Jesus to heal the man with the withered hand?
Because it was on the Sabbath day and they wanted something to accuse him of.
Exactly. It was on the Sabbath day and they wanted something to accuse him of. How did Jesus feel about it?
He got angry.
He got angry. He got upset about it. He's like they have taken the Sabbath day and they just warped it in such a way, terrible way, and done way beyond what it was meant for. What is the main content of the book of Revelation? I heard it. I know. Say it if no one knows it.
Victory.
Victory. Victory in Jesus, what we see. Victory in Christ, the victory that's found there in it. And it's just, most people would say, oh, it's talking about what's going to happen to the world and everything, what we're probably dealing with. No, that's not what it is. Everything in Revelation except for talks about heaven has already happened. It's already happened and it took place during the first and second centuries that we see there. So let's go and move on a little more. As we look at Genesis 7, 21 to 23, the flood. Were there any living creatures outside the ark that lived?
Yes.
Of course, yes. Any water creature would live without a doubt. Next one. Why did God not kill all the Egyptians with pestilence from the start rather than choose a series of plagues? To show His power. Exactly, that's what we're saying here. To show the power that He had. Remember, each plague had to deal with we see dealing with different gods that the Israelites, I'm all tongue-tied, that the Egyptians had, and God wanted to show His power over all of them, wanted the whole world to see it. All right, next one, we're going to go jump over the plagues of locusts and darkness. How intense was the plague of darkness in Egypt?
3 days.
3 days, and I love what exact dark, and then what Greg said, they felt it. And instead of, in the Hebrew, it's darkness of darkness is the way that's translated. And I mean, like I said, if you've ever been in a cavern before where they turn out the lights, you know what it means to feel the dark. You actually feel it. You really do. Bill, go
The
ahead.
only time I felt anything near what the Bible describes is when I've been deep in a cave and all the light were cut out. That is really dark.
Yep, that's what I was saying. And we talked about that about Virginia. We did, and they turn out the lights, and first they tell you, grab something or hold on to something next to you, and do not move what we're about to do. And I'm telling you, they turn it off, and it's like I said, you can't see this right here. I mean, you try to, and it's just crazy how that works. All right, let's go to the next one. After the plague of darkness, Pharaoh said all could leave and go worship, except the men, the women, the children, or the livestock.
Livestock.
He said livestock wasn't going. That was he before they said that only the men could go. And now they're now they're saying basically you can take everybody, but you can't take livestock. Well, that's crazy. We can't do any sacrificing then. And so we move on to the next one. Exodus 11, 12, 1 through 20, the first Passover. Describe the sheep or goat to be eaten by the Israelites on the evening of the first Passover.
Without blemish.
Without blemish. And they're supposed to eat how much of it? Every bit of it, and not break any what? Bones. Exactly right. So let's go to the next one. What were the Israelites to remember when they celebrated the Feast of the Unleavened Bread?
Their departure from Egypt.
They're leaving Egypt. That's exactly right. The Exodus. They would always remember that Exodus. That's how God, had them prepare something in haste. It was really fast. They do it and be done with it. And how often would they remember this now? Just that one time? It'd be perpetual. It's exactly right for that of Israel that we see. Brings us to the next one. These are a little longer. We see here Exodus 12, 21, 1. What firstborn did God not strike in Egypt? A, Israelites with blood on their doorposts. B, of Pharaoh. C, of the poor. D, of cattle. A, that's exactly right. But notice what it said. They had to have the blood on the doorposts and lintel. They had to have that, and he did. Next thing it says there, describe the sound in Egypt when God passed over killing the firstborn. Describe the sound in Egypt when passed over killing the firstborn. And it's right. With Israel you heard what? Nothing. You heard nothing. There was no crying, no screaming when it passed over and everything. Now if you go to the Egypt side, you heard wailing and crying and screaming like has never been heard before or never heard thereafter. As it said. We said, imagine those Israelites hearing that. And we said, if you call them and want to walk outside and take a look, what's going on out there? But but God said, do not go outside till the morning. Next one. How long had the Israelites been in Egypt?
430 years.
430 years, exactly right. How many men, women, children, other persons? Because remember, there were other countries that left with Egypt also. We see here livestock was left in Egypt. How much of that was left in Egypt? How many? What did I hear it say again?
600,000.
600,000 men.
Besides the children.
Exactly. And when it says besides children, it's talking about children and women. And usually when we see the count in Israel, when they say men, they talk about age to fight, that are able to fight wars. So you're talking close to 2 million people, exactly, as we said a moment ago, is what we see coming out of there. I always wondered about that, what it looked like. In fact, look at this picture here. Oh, come on, I had it up there. Look at this picture here of them leaving. It could have been like that for a while because it was so skinny, especially when they get farther in the wilderness. But, if you've ever seen pictures of what it looks like after, bison or buffalo, go through an area, it's just trampled. You can tell the difference between that area and the area they weren't. Imagine what this looked like after that many feet walking through there. They're walking on the sand on the road. It was probably hard after that with what we see and what we find. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that too, with being 2 million plus people, that they would have had to have spread out, because no sooner would the front stop for the night that the back end was just going to catch up, and they're going to take off the next morning and leave.
Where'd they go? In fact, we know later when they start actually setting up by tribes, we know that they kind of did a square, basically, is what it was. And we see that. And we're going to see tonight, it actually talks about them. Remember, it talks about them leaving, it's called them an army. They're not an army yet, but they're going to line up in fives, is what they're going to do. And that would be in a formation, like a military formation, what we find. Bill, go ahead.
To get a feel for that number of people, on an SEC Saturday, at any given stadium, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, you've got nearly 100,000 people. Think of 20 times that number moving.
Amazing. Just remarkable. I think about when we lived up near D.C., over 1 million people a day went into D.C. to work. Over 1 million people a day. And actually, it grew more than that as time grew on and as we left. Not now, a lot of that's coming back, of course, but we see that, you can stuck in traffic for hours and on I-95. And so you think about that, we see here, it's just remarkable to think 2 million people. You can't even imagine moving 2 million people, Have you ever imagine staying up, I know we have teachers, watching kids that go on a field trip or something. I know I've gone on field trips before, with kids, as a parent or as a grandparent, and you're like this constantly, you're looking around, counting, making sure you got everybody. 2 million people, it's just remarkable. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, as bad as the traffic is in Atlanta, the left lane on I-75 South is 2 people from HOV. I had a case in the Supreme Court in 92 and 93, and when I was practicing, I stayed in Virginia and drove in. You had to have 4 people to be in the HOV lane. People would meet at McDonald's or somewhere with a sign that said Pentagon or whatever it was. And it was amazing to me that number of people transporting on the interstate coming in. So 1 million, no surprise.
Yeah, and that's the only way you can do it there. And they actually have lanes where you pull in, and it just has the name Pentagon, or it'll say different places where you go, and you just jump in a car. You don't even know the person, but there's rules. You can't talk, can't turn on the radio, can't do all this. It's kind of wild. So, but everyone's like, I don't live like that. Well, you don't live in the city. So, but Dad, do you have a comment?
I was going to just say, the state of Rhode Island has 1,097,379 people.
Yeah.
That's the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah, so it almost take two of them. I mean, that's amazing. All right, so let's get into this. We see here that God's going to lead the Israelites. We see here a journey of faith and obedience. Exodus 13, we know, is a very pivotal chapter in the Bible. Where we look at this here, it marks the beginning of Israel's journey from Egypt, from the slavery into the promised land now is where they're supposed to be going. But remember, it's kind of interesting. We're going to find out there was an easier route. There was a much quicker route that would have took them straight into the promised land, but that wasn't going to happen. God wasn't going to have it happen like that for reasons. So after centuries of slavery, God miraculously delivers His people through Moses and Aaron and sets them on the path where He leads them, protects them, provides for them. He does everything for them. There was nothing they needed to do but be present. That was basically it that we see what's going on here. This passage teaches us about God's guidance and the supreme importance of obedience and the necessity of remembering His faithfulness. So with all that happening, we're going to go to this first part here, is the consecration of the firstborn, or the dedication of the firstborn. We would see here in Exodus chapter 13, 1 through 16. But we're going to start with basically, we're going to go ahead and read verses 1 and 2, where God commands to consecrate the firstborn. This has to do with what we saw in Egypt, but they're going to do out here now with Israel. If someone want to read this for us, please.
And the Lord spake to Moses, saying, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine.
Thank you. So the chapter begins with God instructing Moses to consecrate, so that means dedicate. We would find here to basically dedicate or sanctify, even that means setting apart for God. Every firstborn, both human and animals, to Him. As we continue to read, we find out it wasn't the girls, it was only the boys. So as we continue to read through this, that the firstborn of the boys were, and animals, animal too were consecrated, basically set apart for God. And He said they're mine, basically, that He's going to use these people. They're going to be brought up in the ways of God. They're going to be brought up in the ways of looking for that one day with Christ, and not knowing that they'll get to there. But all that happening, that this is who they're about. And the word sanctify, simply here, as we said, means set apart. In fact, if you go to verse 12, we go ahead just a moment. It actually says that there. It says that you shall set apart to the Lord all the open womb that is of the firstborn that comes from animal which you have. The males shall be the Lord. So it goes back to here. He's saying about the males. That would be that. The difference that we saw. And remember, in Egypt, when the firstborn, was it just boys? No, remember, it could be grandparents, parents, adults, children, and it'd be girls or boys, either one. We see that happening. So the act here, basically, as we said, is a reminder of how God spared the Israelite firstborn during the final plague we see here in Egypt. As remember, this is just one day before this. This is just one day after the plague. So the day before this, all those firstborn there in Egypt, we know were killed, that they all died. And we saw also not just the people, but also the animals. We saw that the animals, all the creatures, everything we see, their livestock. Not the creatures, not all the ones that had nothing to do with Egypt, but all the livestock that is there. So this dedication serves as an act of worship, is what it really is. It's an acknowledgement, basically, that everything belongs to God. And because remember, the firstborn in a family, especially the firstborn male, they were to become the what of the family when the father died. They'd be the head of everything. And so God is saying here basically that, look, this is so important that everything, even your firstborn, belongs to me. They needed to get that. Some say, well, that's kind of messed up. No, it's not. It means God wants to take care of them. God wants to supply everything for them. God wants to protect them and do these. So these firstborn males were considered very special and set apart for God's service, which brings us now to Exodus 13, 3 through 10, of the importance of remembering the deliverance. God is going to make it very clear why this is so important to remember this and to carry it on perpetually throughout all the ages, telling everybody about it. Now, we need to understand something. This deliverance wasn't only remembered by Israel. It wasn't only written down by Moses. Even the Egyptians, they found Egyptians where they wrote about this, about the Israelites leaving from Egypt. They write about with Pharaoh and all of his army, how they died and they were killed in the Red Sea, which we'll get to there next on Sunday. And it's just remarkable, all this that takes place here. So don't think, so I've heard some say, well, that's only what the Israelite people said. That's only what, you Christian, you church people said. No. Even the people that happened to the Egyptians, they even recorded it. And it also has been recorded in many different countries throughout the world. And people are like, well, why was that? Because remember, it wasn't only Jews that went out with the Egyptians. It wasn't only Jews who were in slavery in Egypt. It was many different countries that we see. So, all right, so let's jump into this. Let's jump into 13, 3 through 10. So I'm going to read that for us, please.
And Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of the hand of the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib. And it shall be, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And you shall tell your sons in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year.
Thank you. So as we see this here, the very important verses, as we find here these verses, now Moses in verse 3 and 4 commands the people to remember the day. Remember the day of their deliverance from slavery by the celebrated Feast of Unleavened Bread, and remind them that it wasn't Moses that did it. Remember, he's saying it wasn't Moses. It was the hand of God that brought them out of there and allowed them to leave this terrible place that they were dealing with all these hundreds of years. Bill, go ahead.
The designation for remembrance has always struck me, not only for the Jews and the unleavened bread, but for Jesus and the bread and the cup, in that we were not commanded to create a bronze statue. It never has been about an object that we worship or an object that we look to remember. So I thought it was really precise and concise and absolutely to the point to create a food intake, or so to speak, I'm being kind of wrong with it, or like a bread and then the cup for Jesus. It's not about putting the cross up there and touching it or worshiping the cross. We worship Him. They worship God, but if we remember it, it was an item of food.
That's exactly right. It's interesting how, like you said, that you go back to this moment, the unleavened bread, and me and remember, and they would remember perpetually, remember forever, that we see tell that to come in Christ. And then really, if you were a Jew, it was kind of like, oh, this is great. We're still remembering, in a sense, with the unleavened bread. And that's for Jesus' body representing that. And of course, the blood representing, the fruit of vine representing the blood, which we know also, you go back to the time of the Jewish people, they took the blood each time from an animal, but not cleansing their sins, just doing what God said to do for that sacrifice. But continue, go ahead.
I need to quit.
I'll stop you if I need to. Go ahead.
I talked to a Jewish lawyer today, and she was talking about their families gathering for the Passover feast.
Right.
And she was talking about how they do it once a year, they look forward to it, and of course I was able to wax in a very intellectual way about what we're studying, and she was like, wow, you know everything about this. I'm like, yeah, we know everything about it.
That's amazing. She's like, you actually read the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Some people don't think Christ do. I mean, a lot of people don't think anybody who says they're a Christian doesn't believe that they even read the Old Testament at all in there. Rachel, do you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Here, over here. Let me get Rachel first.
Well, I went to the state capitol today and I actually had had a speaker that spoke about the Passover today. A Jewish
Really?
speaker. Mhm.
That's, yep. And see, this is the time of year, yeah, when they're talking all about it and everything because it's coming about. And it's really neat if you hear something and you know what they're talking about. It's like, oh, wow, I know that. And see how cool that is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they call, the Jews, of course, call this the month of Abib, which is March, April
Yep.
time frame.
Yep.
But what we have, so we know when this takes place, and so it's kind of interesting to see that. And also, it's not enough that for God to say just to remember this in your mind, but you need to practice it
Yep.
too, to see it and to be a part of it and to teach your children. Deuteronomy 6, teach your children.
Yep.
And we need to do that today.
It's exactly right. Same exact thing. Imagine, and this is the thing, we don't, everybody thinks like, oh, all they did was they just removed leaven from the bread. They had to remove leaven from everywhere in the house. I mean, think about that. You couldn't have a little tiny crane, and you know where God said, you make sure, and what they would do is the Jews would sweep everything out. They would make sure everything was gone. And remember, the reason for this, some say, why is the absence of the leaven? Because God was talking about, this is what, remember when he said, eat it in haste, quickly, move on about your business, as what we see here. So as you see there in verse 3 and 4, Dan, go ahead.
Okay, I will see how much you study.
All right.
Where did they get more leaven after they threw everything out?
Where did they get it?
Yeah, where did they get more?
God miraculously made it appear in their house. No, I'm kidding. He did make that happen one time. He didn't do it there. No, I guess they would get it. Well, it went outside, so it just had to be out of their house, is what it said. They didn't have to take it. I don't know where they put it, because it didn't say they had to take it out of the camp, is what they would call it, and it was out of their homes. And so, that's a great question. It really is. They went down to the supermarket, bought some more. But verse 4, as we've said, reminded, here's the calendar. And I think I may have showed this the other day. So it's called Nisan is what it's also referred to. That would be the way of referring when you see the Hebrew to the Greek. And but Abib is also the name, as we see there. As was stated, it was March to April, which is interesting because that's about the same time we see with Jesus, resurrection of Jesus in that period. That is true without a doubt. We don't know the Sunday it happened on, but we do know it happened in this time period, as we see, which I think is really, really remarkable. Thinking this is what God had, their exodus, getting them out of there, and we see the same thing with Jesus, coming about and establishing that brand new law. Because remember, when we looked at it a little ways back, he said, this is a new year for you. This is a new calendar. Day starts over right now. And imagine with Jesus Christ, everything can start over. You have a whole new covenant. And we see that. Dad, go ahead.
It's interesting. I think it's in Acts 12 where the translators for the word Passover changed it to Easter.
Yep. Yeah, the only place that does it is KJV.
The only place.
The King James Version is the only one that does that for some reason. And it was just, they changed it because they were already practicing Easter, is what we figured, is what was going on. Other versions actually say Passover, which is the correct way to say it. But that's where, if you wonder about Easter, that's where they get that's the time of celebrating the resurrection of Jesus and so on. Because it is the right time frame, we just don't know exactly what day. And it's why I always think it's interesting, our Easter is never on the same day. It's always different. I remember it was on my birthday one year, way back at the beginning of my life. And, and we see that. So it's really interesting about that. So as we go through this, the annual observance of the feast, it's a teaching tool for future generations. For them to look at and understand. As we would see, we saw verses 8 and 10, and it was once again a reminder of God's mighty hand. So let's jump into verses 11 through 16. Time's going pretty quick. The redemption of the firstborn. Now here we have the redemption of the firstborn. Once again, we go a little more into this firstborn area. So let's go ahead and read. Let me get back to there. Go ahead and read it. Someone go and read 11 through 16, please.
And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall set apart to the Lord all that open the womb, that is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have. The male shall be the Lord's, but every firstborn of the donkey you shall redeem with the lamb, and if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. So it shall be, when your son asks you in times come, saying, what is this? That you shall say to him, By strength of hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beasts.
Thank you. So as we look at this, oh wait, I think there's one more. Yep, there you go.
Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all males that open the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. It shall be as a sign on your hand and as frontlets between your eyes, for by strength of the hand of the Lord brought us out of Egypt.
Thank you. So here it sounds like we're just reading the same thing again. God's telling Moses, Moses is telling the people. And we want to see how it's the same, how he's not diverting from it. He does tell us a few other things that happened there, knowing that they were commanded to redeem every firstborn son, who would be done by sacrificing the firstborn of the animal. So, very important. Some religions would say sacrifice the child. And, and how terrible that would be. It takes us back to Abraham as we think about that. But we know God didn't have that happen. He stopped, he was looking at his faith. And, you wonder sometimes if they were hearing this, they're like, is this going to happen again? Well, what's happening here? But of course it's not. So now the donkey, he used the donkey as an example of how an unclean animal. So if it's an unclean animal, he says you need to replace it with that of the lamb. But if you don't have that, you need to break the donkey's neck. So basically it needs to be killed beforehand in that way. Not that because of being unclean. So the redemption of the firstborn son has been secured in the blood of a substitution of sacrificial lamb is what's happening here. The practice reminds us of how God struck down the Egyptian firstborn to spare the Israelites. Once again, we see that. And the act was to be explained, once again, to future generations. So we all know all that. We understand that. But what they're doing here is they need to be living in gratitude all their life. Gratitude of what God did for them. And remember how it says, you shall tell your child, when your child asks, you'll tell them that. That goes back to that teaching, Deuteronomy 6, and the importance of it. At all times, when they're up, when they're sleeping, when they're rising up, all these times, and just constant reminders. So as we see here, we're going to go to verses 17 and 22. The way of the wilderness. So God's guidance through the wilderness. He's going to walk them. Now notice each time he talks about the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Hivites. They're not going to see any of that after 40 years. Some of these people here will never even see it because they're going to die before they even get there. And remember, people aren't living for long years like they used to. So it's real important to realize this of what's happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, back to train up to verse 16. I just want to mention, most of us probably know this, but it talks about the frontlets, be a sign on your hand and on your head. The phylacteries that they made, the little boxes that you wear. If they were right-handed, they wore it on the left. And if they were right or left-handed, they put it on the right. And then here was a little box. They put scriptures in there. And that's what they would wear at the Passover. And that's what you will see even today, the Jews wearing these little boxes on their forehead and on their wrist.
That's what you probably I'm sure everybody's seen the pictures, before, seen with the wedding wall and others when they've got that on, and especially this time of year, you're going to see that a lot with Jews. So, and it is a sign, but it's interesting how they took the way they took it.
They think this was where they
started it. Yeah, we started with everything. But we know that's not, we know more likely they weren't doing that. God was just trying to remember that it's here and here. You use these all the time and you use this all the time. And everybody's going to see this right here, see your head. And so everything of God would be on those fronts. Which brings us to the way of the wilderness, 13, 17 through 22. So we're going to begin with verse 17 through 18. We're going to look at God's unconventional route. That's the way I look at it. Because they could have been in the land of Canaan in just a month. They could have been there in a month. Just 1 month and 40 years. But there's some reasons behind it. Not just that God decided he wanted to punish them or God wanted their faith to grow. God knew what he was doing because of what would happen if they went that way. So let's go ahead and read this. So someone read verses 17 and 18, please.
Then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, and that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their mind when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up and poured the drinks out of the land of Egypt.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to see this. I'm going to show you this map. God knew exactly what not just the Israelites, it's what an everyday human would do. If you're going in a direction, all of a sudden you see armies coming back at you, you're thinking they're in front of you, they're going to do what to you? They're going to kill you. We have a better chance maybe getting in Egypt and being there. Where God takes them the other way, there's only one way to go. Once you get in there, it gets so tight, you either go all the way to the Red Sea, or you turn around and you die by Egypt. I mean, so that God knows exactly what he's doing here. But here's the map to kind of give you an idea. This up here, remember, they're in Goshen. They came down here to Succoth. This is where they're at. We're going to be traveling this way today. But this is where they could have went. They could have went just like this. And once you see Jerusalem, look how close that is. I mean, it's not that far at all, is it? I mean, it's just a month about travel without many people, as you can see there. But he's taking them all this, and then they're just going to go for a while. I mean, it's just wild. And they stay in some areas for quite a long time. It's not like they broke camp every day and then went away. Even during this time, if you notice, you'll see some, I don't think it's on this map. Yeah, I have my next map. It actually has how many days they stayed at each place. So the wilderness by the sea, I want to take it a little bit further. Let me show them this first map. As we see here, the wilderness by the sea. So here they come down here. Succoth. You go here to Medill and Etham. This is where Migdal, where you also have what is called the watchtower that's there. So this is the way they came through. You can see how many days. Here there were 6 days, 16, and here, back when they got finally to here, that's day 17 and 25. So they've been out for a little while now. It's not like they went out and he chased them in 3 days and caught up. That's not what this is. And that's the other reason, too, why he was able to catch up, because they stayed some time in these places. And it's like, how are we going to cross the water? You know what I mean? That's what it comes down to. As we see here, Dad, go ahead.
You mentioned this the other day. An important fact to remember, too, is these folks were slaves, they were farmers,
Yep.
They were not military people yet.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. And then that's the thing, I mean, I believe they were probably very strong and, and had a lot of energy and endurance because of the work that they did, but they didn't know how to handle a sword, they didn't know how to handle a spear, they didn't know how to handle a slingshot like that of David, because you think if they had one of those in Egypt, what was going to happen to it? It'd been confiscated and they'd probably been killed for it. I mean, so because nothing to be done. So we see here that God knew that they would face war and it would be way too soon. Way too soon for this. In fact, we notice the main war that's going to come about is when we get to Joshua. That we see that happen. So the path through the wilderness required dependence on God and their faith in what we see here. The Israelites, we know, left Egypt in orderly ranks. They were not yet ready for warfare, Exodus 13:18. It's interesting, the Hebrew, the two-word orderly ranks actually means, it's really funny and interesting, where it says orderly ranks actually means armed and armed for warfare. So it's interesting, we don't know if they had something now, if they were making things, whatever it is. I think really what it's getting at here, meaning that they were moving in that direction down the years for warfare. They didn't know what was going to happen, but one thing we do know, God's going to fight the battles for them right now. God's going to take care of all that. But you go back to Joshua 1:14, it actually uses the same word in the Hebrew, and it actually says armed, if you notice that there on that. It's the same exact Hebrew word that we saw a minute ago, dealing with the orderly ranks. So it's also in 4:12. I don't know if I put that one on there or not. Yeah, 4:12, same thing. We're told in Jewish history that the Israelites would have been marching, I said this earlier, in lines of five. And if they were, they may have had something. But they were not prepared to be soldiers yet for war, as we just stated. In fact, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2, someone will read that for us, please. Notice what it says here.
And you shall remember that the Lord your God led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble you and test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not.
That's exactly right. That's what we see God doing, and they blow it in the first test. They blow it in a moment when it deals with the waters, drinking of it. We'll see that next week, and also that Mount Sinai, didn't they? I mean, they truly blew it there. So as we look at this here, Exodus 13 and 19, very important. Remember something important that they were not supposed to forget when they left Egypt. What were they supposed to take with them?
Bones of Joseph.
The bones of Joseph, exactly right. Which I'll read this. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. Notice who took it. Moses didn't just let anybody take it. He did this. And it says, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So Joseph, we know before his death, had made the Israelites swear this. You go back to Genesis 50, we're not going to read it, but this is where Moses says for this to be done. Joseph Yeah, Joseph, not Joshua. This act symbolizes the fulfillment, though, what's really interesting, of God's promise to bring his people out of the promised land. Because in Hebrews 11:22 says, by faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instruction concerning his bones. See, God had told Joseph, we're going to get, all the people are going to get out of here one day. Do you think Joseph really, understood the 430 years of them being there? I mean, that's just remarkable to think that. And amazing that someone said, wow, they never lost those bones. I mean, they had to have them somewhere. We know where they are because I've done that before. I showed you where the backyard of Joseph, and he had a shrine there that actually looked like a pyramid. We see with the statue in there, the red hair that was on it. So this is an accurate reminder of God to keep going in the right direction, which now brings us to verses 20 to 22, the presence of God in a pillar of cloud and fire. It's very important to get this. Now, when I say the presence of God, I mean Jesus, because it tells us later that it was the angel of the Lord that was guiding them. It was a pillar of cloud during the day and a fire at night. And we're going to see in a little bit where it actually did both of them in one shot when the Egyptians catch up to them. We're going to find that. So let's go ahead and read this, 20 through 22, please.
So they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham at the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of the cloud by day or the pillar of the fire by night from before the people.
Thank you. So what he means by that is his presence never left. It was always there. And so here's, once again, we'll show that again where Etham, where we see where they camped at. This is day 16. They're right here, they're camping. And why it calls it the edge of the wilderness, because it wasn't normal for people to go that far. Once you get to there, it gets really, really bad, really, really dry. It'd be like crossing a desert that you had no business crossing at all, that we would see here. Showing, that and it also, when it says the wilderness, they're stepping into the unknown. And that's the best way to kind of think about it. Also, Etham, this is Etham to give you an idea of where you're going. So they're coming up this right here you see here is this first arrow right there is this, come on back, is this right here. And then they're going to move back down this way to come to the Red Sea. Because they're getting over here, what does it look like in the distance? Mountains. In fact, look at these, what we're going to find, these mountains. So look how they get really high really quick. In fact, when we look at actual pictures, they're cliffs. There's really, you can't go that direction. There's nowhere to go. So it's called, they're shut in by the wilderness of what we see here. Some call it the dead end. One more, I think, right here, another way, a topography where you can see it, that they move there. They come to here, and they got to be thinking like this, like, where are we going, Moses? Where are we headed to? Does Moses know? He don't know. He's just following where. Guess what? The cloud or the fire is leading them to. And that's what we find. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting, if you go back to the other map, that it looks like they could have gone up to where they were going to cross the Red Sea and gone straight across. But God had them go up, and then come back down.
Well, and when you look at it actually in a picture, there's a reason, because there's a little trail that goes in between the mountains and then goes back down through over there. Okay. And I'll show you that next on Sunday. We did it when we did Hebrews 11. I showed that. And in fact, we actually, remember I did a video, we rode through it as we were going through there. So the pillar of cloud provided shade, not only direction, but also shade. I want you to think how hot it got in that desert. Also brought shade, shielding them from the harsh desert. How do we know that? Here it is. This is what they ran into. I thought I had a picture of it. There you go. How many here can rock climb? These people aren't going to do that. There's no way whatsoever. That many people that may push it over, I don't know. No, but you think about this, what we have here. Psalm 105, before I'm out of time. So, come on, turn me. There we go. Psalm 105, verse 39 talks about he spread a cloud for a covering and fire to give light in the night. I love that there. It tells us it covered them to keep them cool from the desert, from the heat. So as we look at this, finally the cloud and fire represented God's divine leadership. Also, we're not going to read all this, I don't have time. But it goes all through this about the leadership that God was doing this to lead them in the direction. Because you got to think about this. These people had no clue where they were going. Moses had somewhat of an idea of, the wilderness because of where his father-in-law Jethro was from, but he didn't go this way. He wouldn't have done this. In fact, we know the way he went on the other side of the Red Sea came around. So they're getting to this point, and this point is for a purpose, to see how they handle it, to see if their faith is strong enough to wait on God, or if they're going to scream and cry like babies and run back the other direction. And Moses keeps them calm and keeps them there. I saw a hand up, one more hand. Anybody? Bill, go ahead before we close.
We all know what it's like on the hottest southern summer day in Georgia, and you know the difference when a beautiful cumulus cloud moves between the sun and the earth, and it just feels like it drops the temperature 20 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
And all the difference in the world. So Captain, I'll talk about the cloud.
Yep.
Provided that, yeah.
Exactly. I know a lot of you have been at a football game in August, you know, there, and once that cloud goes in front of the sun, it's like, oh, yeah. That's exactly, imagine, this was over them, though, the whole time, as we see here as God. Doesn't mean they never got sunlight, but he would take care of them, and it was really important. And remember, fire, we go, why is fire so important? What happens in the desert at night?
It's cold.
It's really cold, so there's nothing to stop anything. And that's what we see here that God doing, especially when you come off the water, because guess what? You're going to have a little bit of wind coming off the water we see there. All right, I'm out of time. Bill, go ahead one more time. Go ahead.
Well, I think I always reference SEC stadiums or big football stadiums, but think of the logistics, literally the logistics, not of the 100,000 stadium, but of 20 stadiums, water, food, bathroom, just space.
Yeah.
Just literal living space. There was an enormous logistical issue handled 24/7.
That's exactly right. There was no privacy. There was no privacy. There weren't really any trees, no bushes. I mean, you couldn't hide behind something. There was no privacy. And and that shows us something else. They had to learn to rely not only on God, but one another. And that's what we see happening with Israel, with the church, even when you bring it past that. All right, we'll go ahead and in there. I hear them at the doors. They're just waiting to come out. All right. Thanks for the class. Appreciate it.
Okay, now time for announcements. I love getting these texts like I did today from Ernie with good news for Amanda. I'm really thankful that our president answered and that she's had a good result on the test. But please continue to keep her in your prayers, as well as others. Kevin is having another scan on April 4th. That's coming up very soon. And David, I have not talked to David lately, but I know he is in his outpatient rehab at Polk Medical Center. And Kara, is anybody got
I heard she got
I'm
out.
not either, okay. So please continue to keep Kara Lawrence in your prayers too. And so there is I need to mention on that. Also the food pantry, is eating canned food. The Baby Love Ministry is doing very well. I'm proud of where we are and where we're headed. If you need one of those bottles in the bag, give them one of the baby bottles and fill it up with money. Okay. There's a Ladies' Day program where the bulletin has the Ladies' Day program coming up April 12th. That's Saturday week. And the 33rd annual Ladies' Day program in West Area Church of Christ. God's plan is our purpose. That's on April 26th, 20 weeks from now. Okay, if you open up your Bibles, I kind of get the jump start on what we're going to talk about Sunday, Exodus 14, chapter 21, chapter 14, 21 and 22. We're going to talk quickly my couple of 2 cents on the parting of the Red Sea. This on the Sunday, April the 13th, our class, after class, is going to eat right over here. And we're going to watch the Ten Commandments. Any of you seen the 1956 movie by Cecil B. DeMille called The Ten Commandments? Have you seen it?
Numerous.
Oh, yeah, okay. For our family, it was almost always an annual event to watch the movie, created a long time ago. Well, that was movie magic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about movie magic versus God's power. I happened to be at Paramount Studio. Laura was actually in a movie, and she was invited to the premiere in Hollywood, all the glitz and glamour of the red carpet and everything. And we took an extra day to go visit the Paramount Studios, and I saw where they filmed the movie magic of the 1956 movie, The Parting of the Red Sea. And our guide took us to the area. It happened to be, I'm fixing to bust a lot of bubbles right here about it, but obviously it was not a true parting of the Red Sea. We went to Paramount Studios, and what they had done is there was a huge wall on a building that had no windows on it, and the mural of the distant view of the parting of the Red Sea, and we were actually in a sunken parking lot. What they had done is they had poured a parking lot to about 6-foot walls. You pulled down into the parking lot to park because they didn't want to just create this huge pool and have no use for it. So literally, we were standing in a parking lot with cars, and the guy pointed out that these are the walls. There's 6-foot walls all the way around, and they closed in, of course, where cars were parked in, and they filled it up with water. And before they filled it up with water, they had glass set on both sides to hold the water back. I mean, true movie magic. If you've seen the 1956 movie, when they had no special effects, you can see that it really was pretty neat to see how the description the Bible gives us in Exodus chapter 14, verse 21 and 22, they did their best to mimic that, to do it exactly like they did. And for me, as a kid watching it growing up, it was movie magic. But that's all it was movie magic. And for me to be in that parking lot, and I could see exactly what they were saying, and we had seen just a brief snippet of the movie. But movie magic is a whole lot different than God's power. And God's power was on full display when the scene was set of the some 2 million Israelites with their backs to the sea. By the way, and when we were considering trying a case, and I'm looking at the other side's evidence and the other side's case, and maybe why we're not settling it or why we're not having a discussion, we always discuss this. Burn the bridges and backs to the sea. If the bridges are burnt, your back's to the sea, you better fight to the death. And that was really the situation the Israelites were in. The fight, they didn't know how. So they were totally dependent on what God was going to do for them. But again, once again, that faith issue always seemed to raise its head with the Israelites at the worst time. But if you think about it, when you saw over 600 chariots charging towards you. By the way, we don't know what a chariot is, but these were ferocious chariots. These were chariots led with horses, and a lot of them had spikes coming out the side that could do damage to people going by, and they were fast, and they created this incredible smoke, dust swirling up. And when you see 600 chariots, it might as well feel like 600,000 chariots going toward them, and they were very, very much afraid. And what did God do? Let's read exactly. And by the way, you know, politicians can go on long and long and long. And Rachel, you were there today. You heard probably some speeches from the well of the house and just waxing eloquently, were they not? Okay. But this is really concise. Listen to what the Bible says exactly about what God did. And the book of Exodus 14, 21, 22. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. This is the Red Sea in front of him. And we're going to be talking next week about the distance, and we know where it is. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Look at 22. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground,
and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand, and a wall unto them on their left. Now, the image given us about the movie Magic and the 1956 film Ten Commandments is pretty incredible, just to watch that. And even fathom being a part of that journey across the dry land with viewing the Red Sea, walls of the water just being held back by God, that is God's power. So I remind you that, and by the way, there were other writers in the Bible that talked about it. You remember David wrote about it in Psalms 136:13 about the parting of the Red Sea. Isaiah wrote about it in chapter 51, verse 10. Rahab wrote about it in Joshua chapter 2, verse 10. God delivered his people, he can deliver us. And he has the power to part a sea, literally part it to allow his people to traverse through. And then he collapsed it back upon the Egyptian army, never to be seen again. Remember this, God's power is stronger than anything we can ever imagine, and we should always remember that we can rely on God's power for us. If you, who's listening? What's the song? Okay. You're subject to the invitation.
Who at the door is standing, patiently drawing near, entrance within demanding, whose is the voice I hear? Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou would heed my calling, I will abide with thee. Door of my heart I hasten, thee will I open wide. Though he rebuke and chasten, he shall with me abide. Sweetly the tones are falling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee.
I have one thing to announce. My mom lives far away from here. She lives in the Memphis, Tennessee area. They are having very severe weather, like a 5 out of 5. She just requests prayers for having such severe weather over there.
Before we have to close, I also want to remind everybody, Gordon Springs is having a singing, I believe it's this Friday night. So don't forget that. If you can go, please go. We ask people to come to our things when we have them here. It's only, good that if we reciprocate, if you can go.
All right, nothing else. We'll have our closing prayer.
Would you pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that you have given us to come and hear another portion of your word. We thank you for the preparedness of the teachers and all those that have spoken tonight. Pray that we take what they have said, apply it to our everyday lives so that we can let our Christian light shine out in the world. Pray that you be with all of our number that are sick and going through treatments right now. We pray that they would regain a measure of their health. We pray to be with all those that are in the pathway of the storms. Help them to be safe and make it through. We pray that you forgive us of all our sins and bring us back at the next point in time. In Christ's name we pray.
About taking my
forget what it looks like. I mean, I remember the close out something like that. What was that again? No, I appreciate it. I heard you just like you said. That's perfect. And then when is it again on the? We've been praying for it. We've been praying for it. Well, nobody likes surgery.
I didn't know which way they're going.
She has the house. She does. Picture of. Yes, I'm gonna copy, definitely. No, I'm not hanging out in the house. Yep, that's the Gotcha. That's good. 1840, they're saying 1841. That's perfect. That sounds great. I didn't know anybody had a picture. That's awesome. Thanks a lot. Hey.
We're leaving.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for covering it. I don't know who will be here, but you may not be perfect. Awesome. You don't have to think about it.
Let us know if you hear something tonight. Let us know if you hear something tonight.
Did you know if there, how many other candidates they had?
Okay.
If anyone else has a line for it,
Okay. I mean, it's such a niche, thing, so.
Not tonight. Said something about waiting until after.
Yeah, he said they may be waiting for shifts till contracts come out on Friday.
He said something about waiting after spring break, but I guess it makes sense.
We asked last year, it was
But the thing is, the principal can still offer and say, hey, I want you to do this job, but it's still pending board approval.
Yes.
And it's most of the time the board, if the
Of
principal.
course, I don't know if
doesn't-
I've ever not.
I'm gonna wait until like maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, I
I've
think
heard
that's a
from
great
them,
idea.
I'm gonna just send an email and say, hey, just calling up to
Yeah,
see.
that's the.
That's the way to do it.
That shows.
Keep your name out there in front.
Yep, we're go get
But
her.
the way he was talking, I mean, because he specifically said, for me, I want to make a decision. So he was, I told him, I said, what he was doing was, in the back of his mind, he was thinking, the board is ultimately the final choice. But he, you know, he can still make a choice, it's just not official.
Yes.
The board
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm hoping I'll know something.
I know, and that's, it's, I'm not aggravated.
Because this is a good opportunity, and the kids can go to that school, and good changes happen at school. They got in trouble again, and two kids were down on the school bus. And
See,
I hit one of the kids, and I don't either, I mean, he's a family. And
I mean, they have cameras on the bus.
So we're gonna get back to this tomorrow. Yeah, bus drivers that can never go back to school.
Well,
And, but I wonder if kids are all down.
yeah.
No, the footage will show.
Yes, they,
But-
yeah. Sometimes I wish that there was, like, my kids at school think that there's a camera in our room. It's a motion detector.
Oh, yeah.
And,
There's an awful lot to hear.
but I really wanted to wish there was cameras, because there are things that happen, and I'm like, you're so adamant that it didn't happen, you're saying it so happened.
And
I
school,
can't.
the administration is, sometimes they will back you, sometimes
I
they won't.
usually will, but I have not taken it so serious happen that it makes it something, but there is a possibility. I know with the sped houses, there has been some big things, and now they have cameras in there. Thank you for these things, I appreciate it.
Y'all take care.
Thank you. Don't work too hard
Well,
this
if you
one.
hear
I'm not-
anything, let us
You're
know.
out of trouble this week.
Like I said, the interview went.
Sometimes it's difficult, isn't it? That's a good long, that's a good.
But I asked a lot of questions at the end, I'm like, you know, is there any extracurricular activities that your teachers involved? I said, no, all you have is these two performances a year, and, you know, you have like a student year card, and stuff like that.
Because you don't have homework.
Because they have a couple of coaches, like PE coaches, who go over to the middle school or high school, I think it's high school.
Okay.
And assist, and they can do it. So the art teacher and music teacher, it's not a big deal. But with a schedule like that, I don't even know some of like the band, like volunteer a little bit. So,
That's cool.
You gotta get kiddos down first. Hang it from the ceiling.
yeah. Pretty tall ceilings in our living room, so get a tall ladder and hang them up there, and I mean, you can be here for a
Hang them
while.
off the,
You go clean up that sludge that you left up there.
hang them off the ceiling fan, and just spin it around.
LED bubble.
Oh, wow.
We have,
Who done that?
Jake Carter.
James had some kind of silly putty or something and threw it in the ceiling,
Oh,
and, yeah, it's.
Yeah.
It's still hanging there.
We don't have a ladder to get up there. I'm gonna have to rent or borrow one from someone because the ceilings are like 15
It's
foot.
tall.
15 foot tall.
ladder.
So I had to
The only
go
way I
down
can
and
think to
replace
do
the
it
ceiling fan.
is if you had could put a putty knife on the end of a long enough stick.
Well, it's definitely stained. It's gonna have to be repainted.
Well,
Yeah, that silly putty.
You'll have to, I doubt if you'll ever
Man,
get
you
it.
have to have some pretty good velocity to get it up there.
I mean, he
He's
can
strong.
throw. He's strong.
He is very strong.
Hey, babe, kiddos are in the car. We gotta get Hayden back to the house by 8:30.
Well,
Good luck.
I'll let y'all know something if I know something tomorrow.
Please do.
Hey, good.
Are you,
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right.
Glad we could work something, rubber's not to live that long. Oh, yeah, she was comfortable in there, yeah,
He's
perfect.
working at that
Can you do
rest of
this?
the backyard.
Yes, and
Call.
Oh, yeah, it could be anything.